have to be very careful with it. Perhaps you've heard the funny story about President Jiang Zemin and Premier Li Peng. And Jiang Zemin says, Li Peng, I've heard your English is very good. Say a phrase for me. And Li Peng says, how are you? And so Jiang Zemin says, what does that mean? And Li Peng translates, 怎么是你? So then Jiang Zemin says, that's very good, could you tell me another English phrase? So then Li Peng says, how old are you? And then Jiang Zemin says, and what does that mean? And Li Peng says, 怎么老是你? So translation can be a lot of fun. All right, moving on to the current situation of Chinese in the United States. It's very, very different from the time when I began, and my parents were wrong. I did find a job, and actually my students are finding jobs. The number of students studying Chinese in the United States has doubled in the last 4 or 5 years. There are approximately 300,000 students in all the different learning sectors, I'll explain in a minute, who are studying Chinese in the United States. Now that's not nearly enough. We need far more. There are about 300 million Chinese people in China learning English. And of course, even more in Taiwan and Hong Kong and perhaps in Singapore also. So what is 300,000 compared to 300 million? But still, it's better than before. We have approximately 60,000 who are studying in colleges and universities. And then we have 30 or 40,000 studying in high schools, junior high schools, elementary schools, kindergarten. And then 20 or 30,000 studying in US government schools. Actually, the US military, US State Department, FBI, CIA, alphabet soup, the list goes on and on. There are tens of thousands of people studying Chinese there. And then finally, weekend Chinese schools. You may be familiar with the fact that the Chinese American community in the US, especially along the West Coast, and to a slightly lesser extent in larger East Coast cities, New York City, Philadelphia, and others, there are large groups of Chinese Americans who send their kids to weekend Chinese school. Jewish Americans, some of them go to Hebrew school on the weekend. My father tells me in former days, German Americans would send their kids to German school on Saturday or Sunday. I don't think that's done at all anymore. But certainly the Chinese American people that I know in the larger cities, they send their children. And that comes out actually to the largest group. It's approximately 180,000 enrollments in weekend Chinese schools. Mostly in Mandarin, but actually there's some in Cantonese also. So that adds up to a much larger total number than ever before. What is the motivation for all of this? Well, the Chinese economy is certainly a major motivating factor. And among my students at Williams College, actually we have even more students taking Chinese than we have students taking Spanish. Spanish is the by far most widely studied foreign language in America. But at my school, Chinese #1 and then Spanish #2. And at my college, the favorite combination, the most popular double major is economics and Chinese. Some of my colleagues are not happy about that. They wish it were literature in Chinese or history in Chinese. But I think if we can bring them in and acquaint them with Chinese language and culture, maybe some of them will continue in economics and Chinese, and that's fine. And others will learn Chinese history and Chinese art and Chinese political science and all sorts of different fields related to Chinese studies. And of course, most recently, the Olympics. Congratulations, by the way, about your, do we know yet? Is it a gold medal or a silver medal? Tonight, okay. Well, I'll find out before I leave. I leave tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., so at least I'll know, and I wish you good luck on that one. Well, so a lot is changing in the United States, and it's the same in Canada and Germany and France. I do go back to Europe, try to keep up with my European roots the best I can. So it's a time of great change. For the younger generation to learn Chinese in America is cool. I just heard from some young students here in Singapore yesterday that they think learning Chinese is not cool. Well, I have news for them. A lot of young folks in America think Chinese is cool. In America, Chinese used to be considered a language worth learning because it would help you find out about China's past. So it was a language for looking back to the glories of Chinese history and Chinese philosophy and Chinese art and literature and all of that. Sinology, reading the classics in Chinese, that used to be the main preoccupation of people dealing with Chinese. But those times largely have passed. Now, Chinese is looked at as the key to the future. Chinese is a language for the future, and indeed, now already, I traveled to China twice this past summer, and I spent a while in Shanghai, also Beijing, and it's just absolutely amazing how Shanghai and Beijing have grown and prospered, how the economy is growing. So I certainly would hope that here in Singapore, where your conditions, 你的条件, are so much better for learning Chinese than they are in America or in Europe. I mean, you have Chinese TV stations and Chinese newspapers and billboards in Chinese and a large Chinese-speaking population. This is so much better a place to learn Chinese than Williamstown, Massachusetts, which is where I live. We have 6,000 people and about 500 bears up in the mountains that come down every evening to devour our garbage. So also, students in American Chinese language courses have not only increased in number, but they're much more diverse than before. We have people of all different ethnicities, African Americans, European Americans, and Chinese Americans. When I started Chinese, there were very few Chinese Americans studying Chinese, and I understood that. As a German American, it wasn't cool to study German. If you were a Chinese American in those days, you sort of wanted to show that you could assimilate and be American and look weird. At least some people thought to study Chinese. Of course, that's an understandable but not a good way of looking at it. But now, a lot of students, a lot of Chinese American and actually Asian American students too, especially Korean American students, are studying Chinese. Also, the age group has expanded. We have, in the old days, it used to be mostly graduate students studying classical, historical Chinese subjects. Now we have undergrads, more undergrads than grads, and we have high school students and junior high and elementary, kindergarten, and then also 社会人士, people in their 40s and 50s who want to study Chinese. So this is wonderful. We have some students who've spent a year in China or Taiwan, perhaps in Singapore. So it's a challenge. Students are coming to us with all kinds of different backgrounds. However, a lot of things have improved. We have better textbooks, better dictionaries. I've actually had a hand in writing a few of those textbooks. I'm not sure if they're the better ones, but I have written some. Also, there's a new emphasis on learner-centered pedagogy. In the old days, I was the teacher, I'm in control, I do most of the talking, you guys take notes and listen and take the exams, and if you do well on the exam, you pass. Nowadays, we think